Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back, way back, to ancient Greece, where the marble gleams in the morning light and sandals scuff along sun-baked streets. You'll wake as an Athenian citizen, breathing in the mix of olive oil, sea air, and dust that clings to every surface of this ancient world. It's early, just after dawn, and the city is already humming. Someone nearby is grinding grain, a rooster is shouting for attention, and a distant vendor is warming up his voice to sell figs. You're about to step into a day that's been gone for over 2,000 years, but right now it feels oddly familiar. Of course, if you actually woke up in 5th century BCE Athens, you probably wouldn't survive past breakfast. No modern medicine, no running water, and certainly no Wi-Fi. But don't worry, you're safe here in the soft glow of your screen. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The world outside your small courtyard home is still cool, the white marble of the Acropolis catching the first gold light of sunrise. The faint smell of wood smoke drifts from nearby hearths, and the air feels both ancient and alive. You roll off a thin mat, nothing fancy, and stretch, your joints creaking like worn leather sandals. The roof beams above you are made from rough timber, and sunlight filters through the cracks. There's a chill that tells you the stone floors haven't yet absorbed the day's warmth. Your first task? Splashing cold water on your face from a clay basin. There's no plumbing here, just a servant who fetched water from a public fountain before dawn. You glance around your courtyard, open to the sky, framed by white plaster walls with a small altar to Hestia, goddess of the hearth, standing quietly in one corner. You drop a pinch of barley onto the coals as an offering. The faint hiss sounds like a whisper of approval. Most days begin with small rituals like this, a short prayer, a moment of gratitude to the gods, and maybe a quiet thought about whether they're listening at all. Historians still argue whether most Greeks genuinely believed in divine intervention or just went along with tradition because, well, everyone else did. Whatever the truth, your morning routine wouldn't feel right without it. Your wife and the household slaves are already up. Someone's baking flatbread, and the scent of it makes your stomach growl. The bread is coarse, made from barley instead of wheat, and it's definitely not fluffy. You dip a torn piece into olive oil and drizzle it with honey. Sweet, simple, and enough to get you through the first part of the day. Beside it sits a cup of watered wine. It's normal here to drink wine at all hours, but always diluted. Full-strength wine is for barbarians and reckless poets. From beyond your walls, you hear the sound of the city awakening. Donkeys bray, sandals slap on stone, and somewhere nearby, a coppersmith begins hammering. It's rhythmic, oddly comforting, like the heartbeat of Athens itself. You take a slow breath. This is your world, a bustling city of around 100,000 souls, where the air hums with trade, politics, and gossip. You're a citizen, one of the few men with the right to vote and speak in the assembly. That gives you status, though not necessarily wealth. Your tunic is clean but plain, made from linen if you're lucky. And it's hot enough already that the fabric clings to your back as you move. You tie the thin leather sandals around your ankles and step into the sunlight. The street is narrow, uneven, and full of life. Chickens wander freely, children chase each other with clay toys, and a few dogs, skinny but proud, prowl for scraps. The walls of the houses are modest from the outside, but inside they hide shaded courtyards like your own. It's said that Greek homes look inward, not outward, privacy valued more than show. Historians still debate whether this reflected humility or simply the need to keep dust and heat at bay. As you walk, you pass a neighbor leaning on his doorway, gossiping about the latest decree from the assembly. You nod politely, exchange a few words, and promise to meet later in the agora, the beating heart of civic life. You can already imagine it. Stalls piled with olives, figs, and fish, philosophers arguing beside basket sellers, and that unmistakable tang of sweat, smoke, and sea salt. But before you leave, you glance up. The Parthenon looms above, dazzling in the early light. Even now, cranes and scaffolds cling to it. Yes, even in ancient times, they were still working on that masterpiece. You feel a flicker of pride. The gods have good taste, you think, and so do the architects. There's something peaceful about this hour. The chaos of the day hasn't yet begun. You pass a man sweeping the threshold of a small shrine, humming a tune that sounds older than the stones around him. A cat darts across your path. Somewhere in the distance, the sea glitters like hammered bronze. You can almost smell it, the faint salt carried inland by a lazy breeze. You stop for a moment at a fountain. The water trickles from the mouth of a marble nymph, cool and clear. You cup your hands and drink, feeling the chill spread through your chest. It's easy to take this for granted, but in truth, maintaining these fountains is a point of civic pride. One historian joked that the ancient Athenians had two passions, politics and plumbing. Though, given the number of broken pipes archaeologists find, maybe not in that order. You take another sip and notice a small group of young men nearby, stretching and chatting. They're heading toward the gymnasium, early risers, ambitious, full of that unshakable energy of youth. You remember being like that once. For now, though, your plans are simpler. A visit to the agora, a few errands, maybe a debate or two if you feel sharp. And as you walk, the sounds of the morning grow louder. Vendors call out their wares, fresh figs, fine olives. And somewhere, a musician plucks a few lazy notes on a lyre. It's not a performance, just background music for daily life. You pass a baker's stall, and for a moment, the smell of warm bread almost convinces you to stop again. Almost. But the day awaits, and you're part of it. A single figure among thousands, yet somehow aware that your footsteps echo through time. Centuries from now, people will still study how you lived, what you ate, how you prayed. They'll marvel that in this dusty corner of the world, ideas like democracy, reason, and the Olympic spirit first took root. And yet right now, all you're thinking about is whether you remembered to bring enough coins for breakfast. A street dog trots beside you for a while, tail wagging, tongue lolling. You toss him a crumb of bread. He accepts it solemnly, as if sealing a pact of friendship. Somewhere overhead, swallows dart and chirp between red-tiled roofs. You take another deep breath. The scent of olive groves lingers faintly, carried on a wind that whispers through the hills of Attica. The marble steps beneath your feet are cool for now, but not for long. The sun is climbing, the shadows shrinking, and soon the city will burst into full motion. You pull your cloak tighter, glance once more at the shining Parthenon, and start your descent toward the agora, toward the heart of your day and of ancient Greece itself. The courtyard is bathed in soft sunlight now, and the shadows of the fig tree stretch lazily across the stone floor. The warmth of the morning settles into the walls, and the hum of the city filters in, pots clinking, sandals scraping, voices rising like birdsong. You linger a moment longer by the hearth, letting the flickering flame hypnotize you. Every home, rich or poor, has one. It's the pulse of the household, the sacred space dedicated to Hestia, goddess of the hearth and home. Without her flame, life feels out of rhythm, as though the gods have turned their gaze elsewhere. You crouch beside the small fire pit and stir the embers with a bronze poker, coaxing the orange glow back to life. A thin ribbon of smoke curls upward, scented with olive wood. You toss in a few sprigs of thyme, both as an offering and for the pleasant aroma, and the air fills with that dry, herbal sweetness that smells a bit like sunlight itself. The household slaves move quietly around you, efficient and invisible. A girl no older than 12 brings a clay jug of water and bows her head before slipping back into the shadows.
The first real task of your day isn't grand or philosophical, it's washing. The water is cold enough to make you gasp, but it wakes you faster than any speech in the assembly could. There's no soap as you'd know it, just fine sand or ash for scrubbing, followed by a slick of olive oil to clean and soften the skin. You rub the oil into your arms and chest, then scrape it off with a curved bronze strigil. The tool leaves faint red marks on your skin, but a certain satisfying smoothness behind. Historians still argue whether this method was hygienic or simply ritual habit, but one thing's clear: you feel clean enough to face the Athenian sun.
Breakfast, such as it is, awaits on a low table near the courtyard's edge. A loaf of barley bread, a dish of olives, and a small wedge of cheese. Beside it, a clay cup holds watered wine, the standard morning drink. You tear a piece of bread, dip it in olive oil, and drizzle a touch of honey over the top. The sweetness lingers on your tongue, and you take a slow sip of the wine. It's light, fruity, and mixed 3 parts water to 1 part wine. Any stronger, and your neighbors would start whispering.
You glance toward the doorway that separates the women's quarters from the men's. Inside, your wife directs the household's morning bustle. She's overseeing the weaving today, an endless, rhythmic task that fills the oikos with the sound of the loom: thunk, slide, pull. The household slaves work alongside her, their fingers deft as they guide the threads into tight, beautiful patterns. The finished cloth will become tunics, blankets, or trade goods. You smile faintly. Her management keeps this small empire running.
The walls here are plastered and painted with simple patterns: reds, ochres, blues. Nothing like the grand frescoes of Crete or the later splendor of Roman villas, but pleasant enough. The sunlight dances on the surface, making the colors shimmer. The air is warm but not yet oppressive, and a gentle breeze filters through the open courtyard, carrying hints of sea salt and roasting grain from nearby homes. As you sit, you think briefly of the day ahead, the errands, the assembly, perhaps a stop by the barber's stall. You remember that you promised your neighbor to return a borrowed amphora weeks ago. You also remember, conveniently, that you forgot to do it. Such is the rhythm of life. Some things change little, even over millennia. A sudden burst of laughter breaks your thoughts. Your son, barefoot, sun-browned, and far too awake for this hour, runs across the courtyard chasing a ball of rags. He's supposed to be practicing his reading, but play always wins. You scoop him up, tickle him until he squeals, and then point sternly toward the wax tablets by the wall. He groans dramatically and trudges over to trace the letters of Homeric verse. "Sing, muse," he mutters. It's a small reminder that education here isn't just about letters. It's about character, rhythm, memory. The Greeks believed that words shape the soul.
Nearby, your wife's voice carries softly from the women's room. She's instructing a servant on how to mix the day's perfumes. Olive oil infused with crushed flowers, maybe rose or marjoram. The scent drifts into the air, mingling with the smoke and bread, creating a perfume of ordinary divinity. A scholar once wrote that Greek homes smelled like civilization itself: wood smoke, oil, and humanity. You're inclined to agree. When you finish your meal, you stand and take a moment to adjust your cloak. The fabric is coarse but sturdy, pinned at the shoulder with a bronze brooch. You fasten it carefully. It's one of your few personal luxuries, and losing it would mean explaining yourself to your wife, which is somehow worse than facing a Spartan army. Before stepping out, you return briefly to the hearth. You offer a last pinch of barley to the flame and murmur a quick prayer for calm weather and fair dealings. Superstition? Maybe. But when you live in a world where a strong wind can destroy crops and fortunes alike, it never hurts to stay on good terms with the divine. You step outside, squinting against the brightness. The street is a narrow ribbon of dust and chatter. Neighbors call greetings. Someone waves a half-eaten fig in your direction as a lazy invitation to join breakfast. Across the way, an older woman is already at work pounding herbs for medicine.
She nods politely but doesn't speak. Women here live quieter, more secluded lives, but their knowledge of healing, of birth, of gossip is the city's unseen backbone.
As you start walking toward the agora, a familiar sound stops you, the ringing of a hammer. You peek into the courtyard of a neighbor's home and see him mending a bronze lamp. The rhythm is mesmerizing. Tap, pause, tap. He looks up, grins, and jokes about charging you double for the next repair. You laugh and promise to pay in olives. Humor is the shared language of survival here. Without it, the weight of daily life might be too heavy to carry. Halfway down the street, you pass a small shrine dedicated to Hermes. The god stone figure, carved with exaggerated features, guards the crossroads. You touch the base lightly, a quick gesture for good luck. It's a habit shared by nearly everyone, from merchants to philosophers. Historians still argue whether these Herms were genuine religious icons or more like public mascots, but the truth probably lies somewhere in between. A cluster of children runs past, shouting about a new play being rehearsed at the theater. You smile. Even here, in the midst of daily chores and civic duty, art hums through the streets. Drama, poetry, sculpture, they're not luxuries but necessities, the heartbeat of Athenian identity. The sun climbs higher, gilding the rooftops. You catch sight of your own reflection in a polished bronze vessel displayed at a vendor's stall. The face that stares back is weathered but calm, eyes squinting against the glare, beard just beginning to gray. You tilt your head, smirk slightly, and think, not bad for someone without indoor plumbing. You turn toward the main street leading to the agora, feeling the pulse of the city gathering strength. The streets grow busier with each step, merchants setting up stalls, animals bleating, children darting between carts. The day is alive now, loud and bright and full of promise. But for a moment longer, you pause on the threshold between home and the world. Behind you, the hearth flickers faintly, unseen but steady. Ahead, the noise of the agora beckons. You breathe deeply, balancing between peace and motion. Life, after all, is made of both. The quiet of the morning courtyard and the chaos waiting just beyond its walls. And with that quiet thought, you step forward, your sandals scuffing the dusty stone, the heartbeat of Athens quickening around you. The road widens as you move downhill toward the heart of Athens. The sounds grow sharper, the metallic chatter of tools, the bleating of goats being herded toward the market, the constant hum of people exchanging words and goods. The air grows warmer too, carrying the faint, salty tang from the nearby Piraeus harbor. You pull your cloak a bit tighter, more out of habit than need, and step into the growing crowd. Ahead lies the agora, the open marketplace that beats like a heart at the center of Athenian life. You can already see its sprawl. Rows of stalls shaded by linen awnings, smoke rising from cooking fires, clusters of men gesturing wildly in conversation. It's a living, breathing crossroads of everything. Commerce, gossip, politics, and philosophy all blending together in one dusty, sunlit swirl. You pause for a moment at the edge. The marble colonnades gleam, framing the open square. A statue of Hermes, ever watchful patron of merchants and travelers, stands guard. You give him a small nod of acknowledgement. After all, he's the one who keeps trade and luck moving smoothly. The noise here has its own rhythm. You hear the sing-song calls of sellers advertising their wares. Fresh olives, fine oil from Lesbos, fish from this morning's catch, each trying to outshout the next. Somewhere, a potter is tapping a jar with his knuckles to prove its craftsmanship. The sound rings clear and hollow, satisfying. Nearby, a farmer unloads baskets of figs so ripe their sweet aroma cuts through the smell of smoke and sweat. You weave your way through the crowd, dodging a cart full of amphorae and a goat who clearly believes he owns the road. It's crowded, but not chaotic. Everyone knows the flow. You nod at familiar faces, an old shoemaker with hands like cracked leather, a spice merchant from Corinth who always swears he gives you the special price, and a group of young men debating loudly about who's the best tragedian this season. You can't help but smile. Athens loves an argument almost as much as it loves olives.
You stop first at a bread stall where round loaves are stacked in neat pyramids. The baker, a stout man with flour in his beard, greets you with a grin. 2 loaves, he asks, or will you pretend again that you're cutting back? You laugh, hand over a few bronze coins, and take the warm bread wrapped in a strip of cloth. It smells divine, slightly sour, earthy, comforting.
The baker leans closer, lowering his voice. You hear? They say the Spartans are planning something again. Always the Spartans, eh? You shrug. They're always planning something. Doesn't mean they'll do it. He laughs, wiping his hands. True enough. But if they march, at least business will be good. Soldiers eat twice as much as philosophers. You thank him and move on, amused. The Agora is not just a marketplace. It's the city's rumor mill, the pulse of its collective mood. Every whisper of politics, every scrap of foreign news, every ridiculous story about gods disguising themselves as swans or bulls, it all starts or ends here. At the next stall, a young woman sells pottery painted with black figure designs. Her hands move confidently as she arranges cups and bowls, each depicting scenes of gods, heroes, or just everyday life. A woman grinding grain, a man wrestling, a flute player mid-performance. You pick up a small cup, light, perfectly balanced. She notices your interest and smiles. "That one's new," she says. "My father says it's good luck to drink from a cup with Dionysus on it." You look closely at the painted figure. Dionysus lounging with his trademark grin, a vine curling around his wrist. "Then I'll take it," you reply, amused. She wraps it in linen and hands it over.
As you move deeper into the square, the smell of grilled fish and herbs teases the air. You glance toward the food vendors, men tending charcoal braziers, flipping small fish, and sprinkling them with crushed salt and coriander. The sizzling sound alone is enough to make your stomach grumble. You buy one and eat it slowly, careful not to burn your fingers. The taste is smoky, briny, and just a little bitter. Exactly how breakfast should taste when eaten standing in the sun.
Near the center of the Agora, you find the real spectacle, the clusters of talkers. Not traders, but thinkers. Men standing in loose circles, waving their hands, debating the nature of justice or the latest naval budget. One man, his cloak too fine for the heat, declares that democracy is the rule of the fools by the foolish. Another counters that it's the wisdom of the many balancing the folly of the few. You listen, bemused, as they volley ideas like children throwing stones. Historians still argue whether the Agora's philosophers were actually respected or just tolerated as a form of civic entertainment. The truth likely depends on who you asked and how long they'd been listening. You spot a familiar face, the local barber who doubles as a news broadcaster. His stall isn't far from the edge of the square, a shaded spot where men sit for a shave and a dose of gossip. You wave and he beckons you over. "Ah, my favorite citizen," he announces loudly for everyone nearby to hear. "Come, sit, and let me make you look respectable enough to insult the magistrates." You grin and sit on the wooden stool as he begins to scrape your cheeks with a sharpened blade. Around you, the conversation flows. Politics, poetry, scandal. "Did you hear," the barber says, voice low, "that the playwright Euripides keeps talking to himself in public? They say he argues both sides of his own plays before writing them down." You chuckle. Maybe that's how he wins all those prizes. The barber winks. Or maybe the gods just enjoy a man who argues with himself, keeps things interesting. He finishes with a flourish and a dab of perfumed oil behind your ears. "You're ready for the assembly," he says, or at least ready to look thoughtful while pretending to listen. You pay him a few coins, thank him, and head back into the crowd. The sun is climbing higher now, baking the stone underfoot. The murmur of the agora grows deeper, slower, as the heat sets in. You find a spot near the Stoa of Attilos, a long, shaded colonnade where merchants and philosophers seek refuge. Leaning against a cool marble column, you watch the movement of the city unfold before you. It's an endless ballet, merchants calling out prices, boys running errands, men arguing about trade routes, priests passing with solemn faces. Somewhere nearby, a crier announces a new decree about grain taxes. The crowd barely listens. The moment passes into the great humming blur of daily life. And yet, there's something profound about this noise. This, you realize, is what democracy sounds like. Not quiet deliberation in ivory towers, but the messy, vibrant chorus of thousands of voices blending and colliding in real time. Noisy, imperfect, alive. You take one last look around. A flock of pigeons rises suddenly from the square, startled by a dropped amphora that shatters dramatically. The merchant groans. The crowd laughs. The pigeons swirl up into the blue sky like living smoke. You turn toward the path that leads uphill toward the Pnyx, where the assembly meets. The city glimmers in the noon light. Marble, dust, and 1,000 stories carried on the wind. Behind you, the agora hums on, tireless and eternal. You take a deep breath, taste salt and dust on the air, and start walking again. The path from the agora curls past a row of low workshops and shaded stoas. The hum of the market fades behind you, replaced by the sharper sounds of daily trades. The rasp of a whetstone, the rhythmic thud of a mallet, the chatter of men with calloused hands. You pass the familiar trio that marks every good Athenian morning: the barber, the baker, and inevitably, the philosopher. The barber's stall comes first, a small wooden awning with a single stool and a mirror of polished bronze. He spots you before you can slip by. "Ah, the citizen returns," he calls, waving his razor like a conductor's baton. "You didn't nick yourself after my fine work, did you?" You grin. "I survived, but barely. You left me too handsome, dangerous for democracy." The men nearby laugh, and one of them raises his cup in mock salute. The barber shakes his head. "Go on then, before you ruin my reputation with your sarcasm." Next comes the baker's corner, already fragrant with the smell of roasted grain and honey. The man behind the counter is dusted head to toe in flour, like a ghost of wheat. You stop long enough to buy a small honey cake. It's warm, sticky, and sweet enough to make you sigh. "Careful," the baker says, eyes twinkling. "Eat too many of those, and you'll start looking like a Spartan shield." You smirk. "At least Spartans polish their shields. Can't say the same for their manners." He barks a laugh, then slips you an extra bite-sized piece. "For the road," he says, and you move on, licking honey from your thumb. Beyond the baker's stall stands a familiar group beneath a spreading olive tree, the philosophers. There's always at least one, often 3, sometimes 6 if the weather's good and the argument's long. Today, it's 2 men mid-debate, a small crowd gathering like moths around a flame. One is gesturing wildly with both hands, eyes bright. The other stands still, arms crossed, expression flat as a marble bust. You recognize them by type, if not by name. The animated one is clearly the student of someone important. His cloak too clean, his beard too intentional. The stoic is older, with the patience of a man who has outlived 3 wars and most of his ideals. You slow your pace, just enough to catch the rhythm of their argument. Virtue, the younger man insists, comes from knowledge. To know the good is to do the good. The older man snorts. "Tell that to my neighbor. He knows it's wrong to borrow my mule and still does it." Laughter ripples through the bystanders. The younger philosopher doesn't miss a beat. "Then your neighbor's ignorance is his vice." "Or," says the elder dryly, "he's just a bad man who likes mules." You can't help it. You chuckle out loud. The young philosopher shoots you a quick glare, then softens.
You laugh, citizen, but tell me, do you think knowledge is enough to make a man virtuous? You shrug, enjoying the small trap he's trying to set. I think knowledge helps, you say, but hunger makes a better teacher. A starving man learns quickly what matters. The crowd murmurs approval. The older philosopher's mouth twitches, almost a smile. See, the people are wise, he says. They've learned from their bellies, not their books. The young one bristles, but before he can respond, a passing fishmonger yells, "If you two knew as much about fishing as you do about virtue, we'd all eat better." The laughter this time is louder, friendlier. The debate dissolves, as most do, not with a winner, but with good humor. Historians still argue whether philosophers in the agora were actually respected or just tolerated as civic background noise, like pigeons but better spoken. Either way, their presence is constant, their chatter a kind of soft thunder under Athenian life. You linger a moment longer, savoring the shade of the olive tree and the faint breeze that carries the scent of resin and dust. The philosophers resume in quieter tones, now debating whether it's worse to be unjust or merely unlucky. You decide it's too early in the day for that much thinking, and move on. The street opens into a row of small shops, a barber's cousin trimming hair, a sandal maker bending over a strip of leather, a scribe copying a letter for a man who never learned to write. You watch the scribe for a moment. His hand moves like water, steady and elegant, black ink gliding over pale papyrus. The customer, illiterate but proud, watches too, pretending to understand every flourish. You can almost feel his satisfaction as the scribe seals the scroll with a dab of wax. A boy runs by carrying a tray of figs, shouting prices as he goes. Behind him, two women argue about whose husband spoke longer at the last assembly. "He didn't speak," one protests. "He shouted nonsense until they cut him off." "That's still more than your husband managed," the other retorts. You pass them quickly, smiling. Some arguments are eternal. As you near the edge of the agora, you notice a small shrine built into a corner, a rough stone pillar with offerings piled around it. Bits of bread, dried flowers, a few coins. The inscription reads simply, "To the unknown hero." It's one of dozens scattered throughout the city. No one remembers who it was for. Maybe a fallen soldier, maybe just someone the gods favored for a moment. You pause and drop the last of your honey cake beside it. A sweet gift for an anonymous spirit. The gesture feels right. The street beyond grows quieter as you leave the commercial hum behind. The marble steps lead uphill, and from here you can see the Acropolis again, blazing white under the noonday sun. The sight never gets old, even for those who pass it daily. It's more than a building, it's a declaration, a prayer carved in stone. You pass a pair of stonecutters resting under the shade of a half-built wall. Their hands are raw, their skin streaked with dust, but they're laughing about something, trading insults with the easy rhythm of men who've worked together for years. One holds up a chisel. "If philosophers had to carve marble," he says, "they'd talk less and sweat more." The other nods. "And the statues would be uglier." You stop to chat for a moment, ask how the work's going. They tell you about the new project, repairs to a column cracked by an earthquake. They say Poseidon was angry, one says, squinting toward the sea. "But I think the marble just got tired." You laugh. "Maybe it needs wine." "Then we should pour it some," he says, "for the marble, of course." It's these little exchanges, part humor, part habit, that give life its rhythm here. A city isn't just temples and heroes, it's this, the banter, the bread, the thousand tiny gestures that hold everything together. As you reach the edge of the district, you pass one final familiar voice, the barber again, calling to a new customer. "Sit, friend, and let me trim that wild forest you call a beard. The gods won't bless a man who hides his chin from reason." You chuckle to yourself and glance back. The philosopher from before has taken the chair. Poetic justice, you think. You pause one last time at the top of the slope. From here, the view spreads out. The agora shimmering in the sunlight, the Acropolis rising like a crown, the sea glinting faintly beyond the hills. You feel a strange mix of pride and smallness. You're one man among thousands, yet part of something vast, a city that believes, perhaps more than any before or since, that the act of thinking aloud can change the world. You take a slow breath. Somewhere, a lyre plays faintly in the distance, the notes drifting through the heat. You smile, adjust your cloak, and turn toward the sound. The day is far from over. As the day lengthens, the sun leans westward, softening its glare over the white marble city. The streets of Athens, bright and lively in the morning, begin to shift their tone. The frantic energy of trade slows, the voices lower, and the heat begins to lift from the stones beneath your sandals. The hum of the agora fades behind you as you walk toward the quieter slopes near the foot of the Acropolis, a part of the city where artisans, scholars, and dreamers mix with the ordinary citizens who have finished their day's work. You follow the narrow lane that curves past the Stoa, its columns casting long shadows. Along the way, the sounds of everyday life weave together like threads in a tapestry. The creak of wooden carts, the bleating of goats being led home, the rhythmic clink of bronze vessels being washed at a public fountain. Two boys run past, chasing each other with sticks, their laughter bright and sharp as flint. An old man scolds them, half-heartedly, before returning to the shade of a fig tree where he is mending a fishing net. You pause at a small tavern tucked between two houses, marked by a painted amphora above the doorway. The scent of roasted chickpeas and olive oil drifts out, mingled with the faint bitterness of wine. Inside, a few men sit at rough wooden tables, their voices low and steady. You recognize one, a stonemason you spoke to earlier in the day, and he waves you over. "Citizen," he says warmly, sliding a cup toward you. "Sit, before the day fades. The wine's not great, but it's honest." You accept with a nod, the clay cup cool in your hand. The wine is young, sharp, but refreshing. The men are speaking of work, always work, but in a tone less burdened now, softened by fatigue and companionship. "The temple repairs are nearly done," one says, rubbing his hands. "They say it will shine brighter than before." "Until the next earthquake," another mutters, earning a laugh. The talk shifts, as it always does, from stone to politics. You listen quietly, sipping your wine. "They say Pericles will call another assembly soon," someone says. "More talk of expanding the navy." Another man shakes his head. "We have ships enough. What we need are fields that grow faster." "Fields don't win wars," comes the reply. You glance out the open doorway toward the horizon, where the sea glimmers faintly. The city's greatness, its temples, its sculptures, its very confidence, rests on that restless sea. The ships of Athens are both its pride and its burden. Every victory brings new tribute, new power, but also new enemies waiting across the waves. The mason notices your gaze. "You've sailed before?" he asks. You nod. "Once, long ago. Enough to know that Poseidon keeps a cruel sense of humor." He chuckles. "Then you've met him too." The laughter comes easily, fading into a companionable silence. You drain your cup, thank your host, and step back into the street. The light has shifted to amber now, the stones glowing as if the city itself were exhaling. You wander uphill toward the Pnyx, the great meeting place of the Athenian assembly. The crowd has dispersed for the day, but traces of their presence remain. Footprints in the dust, the echo of voices carried on the breeze. You imagine the place alive again, the citizens gathered in rows, the air thick with debate. 1,000 men, each with a say in the fate of the city, arguing not for gods or kings, but for ideas. Even now, when empty, the Pnyx feels electric. You can almost hear the echoes of the speeches that shaped the world.
The rhythmic cadences, the slow persuasion, the sudden bursts of applause. Democracy, they call it. The rule of the people. Yet you know it is messier than that. Voices overlap, tempers flare, and truth often hides behind clever words. Still, it is something rare, something precious, the idea that the ordinary man may speak and the city must listen. You sit for a while on one of the stone benches, feeling the rough texture against your palm. Below you, Athens spreads out in layers of gold and shadow, the rooftops glowing like embers. The Acropolis towers above it all, serene and untouchable. A few others linger here too. 2 boys skipping stones down the slope, a young couple speaking softly, an old woman with a basket of olives resting beside her. The air is filled with the scent of thyme and warm dust. Somewhere nearby, a shepherd's flute plays a slow, wandering tune. After a while, you rise and make your way toward the hills beyond, following the faint sound of water. The path leads to a small spring, its surface trembling in the fading light. A few women are gathered there, filling jars and gossiping. You stop a respectful distance away, dipping your hand in to splash your face. The water is cool and startlingly clear. One of the women glances over. "A long day, traveler?" You nod. "A good one." She smiles faintly. "Then pour a drop for the nymphs, and the next will be better." You do as she says, watching the ripples spread outward. In this city, faith is not a single act. It lives in gestures like this, woven into the rhythm of daily life. A coin for Hermes at the crossroads, a prayer to Demeter before the harvest, a few drops of wine for the nameless gods of the air and earth. As you walk back toward the city, the lamps are being lit one by one. Each small flame flickers like a heartbeat against the darkening sky. You can smell evening fires now, olive wood burning slow and steady, carrying the faint scent of home. The streets are quieter but not silent. You hear laughter, a child crying, a dog barking somewhere far away. You pass a small home where music drifts through the open doorway. Inside, a man plucks a lyre while his wife hums softly. Their little daughter sits beside them, clapping offbeat but smiling. You linger just long enough to catch the melody, an old hymn to Apollo, before continuing on. At last, you reach the edge of the hill overlooking the city. The Parthenon gleams in the moonlight now, silver instead of gold. The columns rise like frozen music, each one carved with care that defies centuries. Even from a distance, you can sense the precision, the devotion, the sheer human labor that made it possible. You think of the stonecutters from earlier, of their laughter and their weary hands. They may never see their names remembered, yet their work will outlast the empires of men. The gods may dwell in marble, but it is mortal sweat that gives the marble life. A breeze stirs, carrying the smell of salt and night-blooming flowers. You close your eyes for a moment. The city breathes around you, a living thing, ancient and eternal, full of contradictions. Athens is loud and restless, but also deeply human. It is a city of talkers and builders, dreamers and doubters, philosophers and bakers. Below you, a bell rings softly, the call for the final prayers at a nearby shrine. You make your way down toward it, the path lit by oil lamps set along the way. A small group gathers there, their faces turned upward. A priest murmurs a blessing in honor of Athena, the guardian of wisdom and war. His voice is low and measured, but his words seem to rise and hang in the cool air like mist. When he finishes, the people disperse quietly, and you are left standing alone before the small altar. You drop a single olive branch at its base, a simple offering, and whisper a word of thanks, not for victory or fortune, but for the day itself, for its noise and its silence, its bread and its laughter. You turn back toward home as the moon climbs higher. The streets gleam pale in its light, and the air feels cooler now. Somewhere far off, a dog howls, answered faintly by another. A small cart rattles by, carrying empty amphorae, the driver humming to himself. As you reach your doorway, you pause once more to look back. The city lies beneath the stars like a sea of stone and light. You think of how tomorrow you will wake again, merchants calling, philosophers arguing, builders shaping marble, sailors preparing their ships. The rhythm will repeat, as it always does. You step inside, closing the wooden door gently behind you. The oil lamp flickers on the table, its glow soft and golden. You unfasten your cloak, set aside your sandals, and stretch out on the woven mat. Outside, the wind carries the faint sound of distant laughter and the rustle of olive branches. Sleep comes slowly, gently, like a tide returning to shore. The hum of the city fades, replaced by a deeper quiet. The last thing you hear is the whisper of Athens itself, a city dreaming of wisdom beneath an endless, patient sky. The scent of barley bread baking drifts through the open doorway as you stir awake, the faintest light of dawn just beginning to blush against the plastered walls. The night's chill still lingers on the mosaic floor beneath your bare feet. Somewhere outside, a rooster begins to crow, far too proud for a bird that small. You yawn, stretch, and listen to the quiet murmurs of your household coming to life. Pots clinking, water being drawn, someone sweeping the courtyard. Today, there will be no assembly to attend, no market errands to run until later. Today is a day to stay home, to live within the heartbeat of your oikos, your household, that small and sacred world where all Greek life begins and ends. You pad softly through the main hall, past clay jars and woven baskets stacked neatly along the wall. A low table holds last night's leftovers, half a loaf of bread, a bowl of olives, and a crusted cup still fragrant with diluted wine. Through the doorway ahead, golden morning light spills into the courtyard, where your wife, Lysandra, is already directing the servants with calm precision. She's the quiet center of the household, a woman who can balance a ledger, scold a lazy maid, and still hum while kneading dough. You smile faintly as you watch her. The Greeks say a man rules his city, but a woman rules the home, and you've long since learned that both realms require a similar amount of diplomacy. Back from your dreams already? She teases without turning, sensing your presence as she pours water into a basin. Dreams of heroic deeds, you say, stepping into the sun, mostly involving eating more bread. She laughs softly. Then you are a hero every day. You wash your hands and face at the basin, the water cool and sharp, a small luxury after a night of stale air. A servant girl, young, perhaps 14, appears beside you with a clean linen cloth. She doesn't meet your eyes as she offers it, but you thank her anyway. Lysandra watches this small exchange with a nod of approval. Breakfast is simple. Bread dipped in olive oil, a handful of figs, a wedge of cheese. The children appear soon after. Your son, who is nearly 12, carrying a wax tablet under his arm, and your daughter, younger by 3 years, already braiding her hair into tight little coils. They chatter as they eat, arguing over who can recite more lines of Homer without stumbling. Remember, you remind your son between bites, your teacher will test you on your memory today, not your confidence. He groans. He says I breathe too loudly when I think. Lysandra chuckles. Then think quieter. The boy rolls his eyes in the universal language of pre-teens across centuries, while his sister smirks triumphantly, reciting the first line of the Iliad in perfect rhythm. You can't help but laugh. After breakfast, you walk with your son to his tutor's house, just a few streets away. The narrow lane smells faintly of wet clay and goat dung. The city is stirring now, merchants opening shutters, women carrying baskets of laundry to the communal fountain, the sharp ring of a blacksmith's hammer echoing somewhere nearby. At the tutor's home, you greet the man,
a balding scholar with ink-stained fingers, then leave your son in his care. He will spend the morning reading poetry, learning arithmetic, and discussing the nature of virtue, though you suspect he's more interested in drawing hoplites in the margins of his tablet. As you walk back home, you think of how different your own youth was. Back then, you learned by doing, by working in the fields, by watching elders at the assembly, by listening to the stories of travelers. Now, the city's sons are taught to read, write, and think, not just to survive. It feels like progress, though historians still argue whether Athens' education system truly prepared its citizens for democracy or merely made them better talkers at dinner parties. When you return home, Lysandra is spinning wool in the shade of the courtyard. The spindle twirls effortlessly between her fingers, the motion so rhythmic it almost lulls you. 2 servant women kneel beside her, one carding the wool, the other preparing dye. The courtyard smells faintly of lavender and wet clay. You take a seat on the low stone bench, watching the domestic choreography unfold. "Did you know," Lysandra says conversationally, "that our neighbor has bought a new slave from Corinth? They say she can weave like Athena herself." "Then she'll have no shortage of admirers," you reply dryly. "Even the gods appreciate good fabric." Lysandra smiles faintly. "Admiration doesn't buy bread, but her owner will make a tidy profit, I'm sure." Slavery, for all its horror by modern eyes, is an accepted rhythm of this world, an unspoken pillar holding up the comfort of Greek households. You've long grown used to it, though occasionally, when a servant laughs too freely or glances too long at the horizon, you find yourself wondering what kind of life they might have had elsewhere. One of the servants, Callias, joins you a moment later, bringing a jug of wine. He's middle-aged, quiet, and efficient, a man who's learned how to move invisibly through his duties. He pours without spilling a drop, and you nod in thanks. As the afternoon wears on, the household settles into its familiar rhythm. Lysandra oversees the pantry, the servants wash clothes and fetch water, and your daughter practices her lyre beneath the fig tree. You can hear the music drifting lazily through the air, the same melody she learned from her mother. You spend a quiet hour repairing a broken stool. Nothing noble, but somehow satisfying. The scrape of the file, the scent of sawdust, the weight of the wood, all of it slows your thoughts, grounding you in the simple act of doing. Occasionally, Lysandra pauses her spinning to glance at you, amused. "I see the great citizen of Athens has turned carpenter today." "Better carpenter than philosopher," you reply. "At least the stool won't argue back." That earns a rare laugh. By midday, the sun is high and merciless. The air hums with heat, and even the cicadas sound tired. A servant draws the woven screens to shade the courtyard, and everyone moves a little slower. The city outside quiets too, settling into the familiar midday lull. Inside, Lysandra sets out lunch. Simple again, lentil stew, olives, and cool water flavored with mint. You eat together, the conversation meandering from household repairs to news of distant relatives. Occasionally, you drift into silence, the only sound the soft clatter of spoons and the whisper of wind. Afterward, she lies down in the shade, resting her eyes while the servants tidy up. You stay seated, sipping the last of your wine, feeling the slow pull of drowsiness creep over you. A nap feels tempting, just a short one perhaps. The city will forgive you. When you wake, the light has shifted again, softer now. The household hums back to life, preparing for evening. You can hear the servants laughing as they grind grain, the children returning from their lessons, eager to show off what they've learned. Your son bursts into the courtyard, waving his wax tablet. "Father, listen, Socrates says knowledge begins in wonder." "Then wonder why your hands are so dirty," Lysandra murmurs without looking up. You grin, pulling him close. He's not wrong, though. Wonder keeps the mind awake. Your daughter joins him, carrying a small basket of figs. She hands one to her mother with a triumphant smile. "These are for the evening meal," she announces. "Half of them are for the meal," Lysandra corrects gently. "The rest are for the journey from the tree to the basket." The girl giggles, caught red-handed, or rather red-fingered with fig juice.
As twilight deepens, the family gathers for the evening meal. You recline on low cushions beside your wife and children, eating slowly, letting conversation ebb and flow like a calm tide. Outside, the sound of crickets fills the air, and the first stars begin to blink awake. Before bed, the household performs its nightly ritual. A servant lights a small oil lamp at the family shrine, and you all offer a few words to Hestia, goddess of the hearth. The flame flickers, reflected in every pair of eyes, young, old, free, and enslaved alike. It's a small thing, this moment of shared reverence. Yet in it lies the quiet strength of Greece, the belief that even the humblest fire, tended faithfully, is worthy of divine attention. As you lie down for the night, the day's warmth still clinging faintly to the stones, you hear Lysandra's voice softly beside you. "Tomorrow," she says, "you should take the boy to the gymnasium. He's old enough now." You murmur agreement, already half asleep. Tomorrow will bring new routines, sweat, training, laughter. But for now, the house breathes quietly around you. The lamp burns low, the gods are satisfied. And somewhere, beyond the walls, Athens dreams again. The next morning greets you with a mellow warmth, the kind that promises a day neither too fierce nor too forgiving. A thin mist still clings to the rooftops, softening the edges of the marble city. You can smell the faint salt from the sea drifting inland, mingling with the aroma of bread baking in clay ovens. Today, you rise with a sense of purpose, the kind that comes from old habit rather than excitement. It's time to head to the gymnasium. Your son, half awake and wholly reluctant, drags his sandals behind you as you both walk through the narrow streets. "Why do we have to go so early?" he mutters. "Because strength is built before the sun gets lazy," you reply, suppressing a grin. "Besides, the best philosophers lecture before breakfast." He groans, the sound echoing off the whitewashed walls. "I thought we were going to train, not listen." "You'll do both," you assure him. "In Athens, the body and mind take turns make each other miserable." He doesn't laugh, but that's fine. You remember being his age, how the idea of self-improvement seemed much less appealing than more sleep. The gymnasium sits just beyond the city's walls, near a grove of plane trees and cypress. It's not just a place of exercise, it's a sanctuary, half sacred, half social. The air here smells different: olive oil, dust, and the faint sweetness of laurel leaves crushed underfoot. The chatter of men fills the space, punctuated by the rhythmic slap of leather straps and the scrape of sandals on stone. You pay a quick greeting to the attendant, a lean man with the kind of perpetual sunburn that comes from years spent outdoors. He nods you toward the dressing area, where men are already stripping down, their clothes folded neatly beside small bronze mirrors. The boy hesitates, glancing around. "It's all right," you say gently. "Everyone here looks awkward the first time." He gives a nervous laugh, then joins you. Together, you strip down to the simple loincloth used for exercise. A young servant offers each of you a small flask of olive oil, and you begin to rub it onto your skin. The smell is sharp and clean, and soon your limbs gleam in the sunlight like polished wood. The boy copies you, though most of his oil ends up on the ground. "Not too much," you remind him, smiling. "You're not a roast chicken." Across the courtyard, older men are wrestling, two at a time, locked in slow, powerful movements. Their bodies glisten with dust and sweat, muscles coiling like rope. Others run laps along the perimeter, or toss discus and javelin under the watchful eye of an instructor. You guide your son toward an open patch of sand where beginners train. A young instructor greets you with a respectful nod. "He's your boy?" You nod. "First day." "Good," the instructor says with a smile. "Then he will ache tonight and thank me next year."
The boy looks horrified. You clap him on the shoulder and whisper, "He's not wrong."
Training begins gently. Stretches, balance, simple movements. You join in, letting your body remember the motions. The rhythm comes back easily. Lunge, step, turn, breathe. The sand feels cool beneath your feet, the sun still mild. You can hear the laughter and grunts of other men, the murmured encouragements, the slap of hands meeting forearms in mock combat. A group nearby practices pancration, the ancient blend of wrestling and boxing. The air is full of the sound of struggle, soft grunts, shifting feet, the dull thud of bodies meeting sand. It looks brutal, but there's beauty in the control, in the way they flow from grip to release, never losing rhythm. Historians still argue whether pancratin was a sport or an early form of self-defense, but to the Greeks, it was simply another path to arete, excellence, both physical and moral. To master one's body was to master one's impulses. At least, that's what the philosophers like to say, usually while sipping wine and avoiding all actual exercise. After a while, you guide your son to the running track. He takes off eagerly, his bare feet kicking up dust. His arms flail a little too wide, but his enthusiasm makes you smile. He reaches the far end breathless, triumphant, before realizing he still has to run back. You wave encouragingly, calling out, "Remember, don't outrun your breath." He collapses into laughter halfway back. You're about to tease him when you notice a familiar figure near the colonnade. A small group gathered around a bearded man in a simple cloak, gesturing as he speaks. Even from here, his voice carries, warm and measured. "That's Socrates," you murmur. The boy looks up from where he's catching his breath. The one who says, "Wonder begins knowledge?" The very same. Curiosity wins over fatigue, and you both wander closer. The small crowd listens as Socrates questions a young athlete. "So," he says, "you believe strength is the highest virtue?" "Yes," the young man replies proudly. "And would you say that strength without wisdom is still good?" The youth hesitates. "I suppose so." Socrates tilts his head. "Then if a fool is strong enough to harm himself, do we still call that virtue?" The man frowns. The crowd chuckles softly. Your son's eyes are wide, caught between fascination and confusion. You whisper, "That's the trick of Socrates. He never tells. You just argue yourself into knowing." Your boy nods, thoughtful. "I think I like him." "I think you'll like him less if you ever try to win an argument with him," you reply. The philosopher continues, speaking of harmony between the body and the soul, between reason and impulse. You find yourself drawn in despite the sweat still drying on your skin. There's something comforting about the cadence of his words, like waves against a shore. Eventually, Socrates smiles, dismissing his impromptu class. The crowd disperses slowly, some deep in thought, others already planning their next exercise. Your son remains silent as you walk back to the courtyard. "He makes it sound like training is for the mind, too," the boy says at last. "It is," you answer, "and if you're lucky, someday you'll realize that the hardest muscle to train is patience." By midday, your muscles ache pleasantly, the kind of soreness that feels earned. You rinse in the public baths attached to the gymnasium, a series of marble basins where the water glints gold under the sun. You pour a small jug over your shoulders, the shock of cold making you gasp. Nearby, men chat about politics, poetry, and food with the same seriousness. One of them, a wiry craftsman, chuckles as you dry off. They say wrestling prepares us for battle. I think it just prepares us to appreciate lying down. Another adds, historians will argue forever whether exercise builds virtue or just better-looking corpses. You grin. Both, perhaps. The gods like symmetry. When you and your son finally dress and leave, the day has ripened into a glowing noon. The olive trees shimmer in the breeze, their silvery leaves whispering softly. The air tastes faintly of dust and sun. You walk home slowly, the boy quiet beside you.
He carries himself differently now, tired but taller somehow, his face flushed with effort and pride. You glance down at him and smile. "How do you feel?" you ask. "Like my arms have turned into bread dough," he says. "But good." You laugh. Then the gods have blessed you with honesty. Back in the city, the streets are quieter, the shops half shuttered for the midday rest. You pass a sculptor's workshop where a man chips delicately at a block of marble. Dust hangs in the air like mist, and each strike of his chisel sounds like the ticking of eternity. The sculptor doesn't look up, but says, "Every statue is hidden in the stone. You just have to set it free." You murmur half to yourself, "Maybe that's true for people too." By the time you reach home, Lysandra has set out lunch. She raises an eyebrow at the sight of your dusty hair and your son's wobbling legs. "So," she says, "did the gymnasium survive?" "Barely," your son groans, collapsing onto a cushion. "Then it was a good day," she says, smiling. You eat slowly, savoring the bread and olives, feeling the fatigue melt into calm. The household hums softly around you. The chatter of servants, the rustle of curtains in the afternoon breeze, the faint plucking of your daughter's lyre. As you stretch out after the meal, your muscles sore but content, you realize that the gymnasium is more than a place of exercise. It's where Athens teaches its sons to be both strong and thoughtful, to shape not just their bodies, but their minds. And as you drift toward a brief midday nap, the faint echo of Socrates' voice lingers in your thoughts, gentle, persistent, asking questions that never quite end. The afternoon passes in a haze of warmth and stillness. The hum of the city fades as Athens takes its daily pause, a quiet rhythm that even the restless have learned to respect. The cicadas hum their endless chorus from the olive groves beyond the walls, and the distant clatter of the agora softens into a lullaby. You lie on your couch in the shade, the woven mat cool beneath your bare arms. The soft rustle of curtains marks the only movement in the room. Your son has long since fallen asleep, sprawled on a pile of cushions, his chest rising and falling in slow, steady rhythm. For a while, you let your own eyes close, but your mind refuses to rest. It wanders, as minds often do in moments of stillness, drifting between thoughts of the morning's training, Socrates' words about virtue, and the long, slow breath of the city itself. Eventually, you rise. The sunlight outside has turned amber, softer now, stretching long shadows across the courtyard. The air smells of thyme and earth. You splash your face with cool water from a clay basin, pull on your himation, and step out into the street. The afternoon nap has done its work. Your limbs feel light again, your thoughts clear. It's time to visit the agora. The walk there is familiar but never dull. The streets hum faintly now as life returns after the midday rest. Shopkeepers reopen their stalls, artisans sweep dust from their thresholds, and children chase each other through the colonnades. The air carries 1,000 mingling scents: freshly baked bread, olive oil, sheep wool, and the faint tang of metal from the blacksmith's forge. As you approach the agora, the sound swells, a symphony of chatter, laughter, and barter. The vast square opens before you, surrounded by stoa and temples, its stone pavement warm underfoot. This is the beating heart of Athens, where every class of citizen, rich or poor, farmer or philosopher, crosses paths. You pause at the edge for a moment, taking it all in. Merchants call out their wares. Fresh figs, imported dates from Phoenicia, fine Attic pottery, stronger than Spartan pride. A pair of donkeys laden with amphora plod slowly through the crowd, their hooves clicking softly against the stone. Near one corner, a group of men debate loudly about a proposed law, hands gesturing, voices overlapping. You spot an old acquaintance near the olive stall, Damon, a trader whose beard seems to grow whiter every time you see him. He's haggling as always, his hands slicing the air as though cutting the price himself.
Still cheating the merchants, Damon? You call with a grin. He turns, squinting, then breaks into a laugh. And still pretending to be a philosopher, I see. You clasp arms in greeting. Damon's grip is firm, his skin rough from years of handling crates and ropes. He gestures for you to join him. Walk with me. I have stories that could make even Herodotus blush. You chuckle. If they're about your business dealings, I don't doubt it. He shrugs, feigning innocence. I merely bring the world to Athens and take a little of Athens back to the world. Together you stroll through the market, past stalls of pottery, textiles, and spices. A group of foreign traders from Egypt are setting out strange trinkets, small glass amulets shaped like eyes and birds. Damon lowers his voice. They say one of the ships from the east brought silks from beyond Persia, so fine they can pass through a ring. You raise an eyebrow. If they're that fine, how would anyone prove it? He grins. That's how you know it's a good story. A short distance away, the air is filled with the metallic rhythm of a blacksmith's hammer. You pause to watch as he shapes a curved blade on his anvil, sparks bursting like brief fireflies. The sound is hypnotic, steady, patient. It's a kind of music, you think, the music of creation, of shaping something lasting from raw metal and will. Nearby, a philosopher sits on the steps of a stoa, surrounded by a small audience. His robes are modest, his gestures calm. You recognize him, Aristophanes, though not the playwright, but a lesser-known speaker of the same name, famous for his gentle manner and sharp wit. Friends, he says, his voice carrying over the market's hum. The soul of the city is its people. A man may build a wall, but it is conversation that makes a polis. You linger, listening as he continues. He speaks not of politics or war, but of kindness, of the quiet duty each citizen has to his neighbor. We call ourselves free, he says, but freedom without thought is only noise. Damon sighs softly beside you. He speaks beautifully, he murmurs, but words don't buy olives. You smile. Maybe not, but they make life worth more than olives. As the sun dips lower, the crowd begins to thin. You make your way toward the stoa of Attalos, where the shade stretches long and cool. Inside, craftsmen work beneath its great columns, sculptors, potters, and scribes. The steady rhythm of their hands fills the space like a heartbeat. One sculptor pauses to dust marble powder from his arms, revealing a half-finished statue of Athena, her gaze serene even in rough stone. She looks patient, you remark. The sculptor smiles faintly without looking up. Patience is the hardest part of marble. The rest is easy. It's just waiting to see what's already inside. You nod, thinking of the gymnasium that morning, of Socrates' words about shaping the soul. Perhaps Athens itself is like marble, its perfection lying not in its wealth or power, but in how patiently it shapes its people. Outside, the light turns golden. You stop at a small stall run by an elderly woman selling honey cakes. She greets you warmly and hands you one with a practiced smile. The sweetness melts on your tongue, sticky and comforting. You buy a second for your son, knowing he'll wake hungry. As you make your way home, the agora behind you hums like a fading dream. The streets are busier again now. Citizens heading toward the theater, slaves carrying water jugs, young men laughing as they race each other toward the river. You pass a group of children playing knucklebones near a fountain, their laughter ringing through the air like music. The sky deepens into a soft purple, the first stars trembling awake above the Acropolis. You glance up at the great hill, its white marble temples glowing with the last light of day. The Parthenon stands serene, watching over the city like a guardian carved from the very spirit of Greece. When you reach home, Lysandra is lighting the lamps. The faint scent of olive oil fills the air, mingling with the aroma of lentil stew simmering in the hearth. Your son stirs as you enter, rubbing his eyes. "Did I miss dinner?" he mumbles. Not yet, you say, handing him the honey cake. Consider this training for patience. He grins sleepily and bites in. Best training ever. Later, after the meal, you all step outside into the courtyard. The night air is soft and cool. A breeze moves through the fig tree, carrying the distant sound of laughter from the streets below. You lean against the wall, looking up at the stars. Your son sits beside you, quiet for a while, then asks, "Do you think the gods ever get tired of watching us?" You smile. Maybe. Or maybe they watch because we're the only ones who still wonder. He nods slowly. I liked listening to Socrates today. He makes everything sound important, even breathing. That's because it is, you reply. Every breath is a chance to think or to listen, and if you can do both, you're wiser than most men. The city seems to breathe with you, its sounds fading into a gentle hush, its lights flickering like embers. Somewhere in the distance, a lyre begins to play, a soft, slow melody drifting through the warm night air. Athens at rest. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the peace of it. The philosopher's voice, the hum of the agora, the laughter of your son, all blending into a single, steady rhythm. Life here is simple and yet infinite. Every day, a small piece of history is lived quietly, folded into the greater story of the city. You think of what Socrates said, that the unexamined life is not worth living. But perhaps, you muse, the examined life is simply one lived with awareness, with gratitude for every sound, every breath, every fleeting golden hour. The stars burn a little brighter now, reflected faintly in the wine cup at your side. You take a sip, letting the cool liquid roll over your tongue. The night deepens, the world softens, and for a moment you feel perfectly still, balanced between thought and silence, between wakefulness and dream. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again over Athens. The gymnasium will open its gates, the agora will fill with voices, and the philosophers will return to their questions. But for now, under the calm gaze of the stars, the city sleeps, and so will you. The day stretches lazily into late afternoon, and the city's energy shifts again. You can sense it, the faint hush that drapes itself over the streets, like the moment between two verses of a song. The men drift toward the baths or symposiums, their business and debate behind them for the day. But for the women of Athens, the rhythm is different, quieter, and yet, if you pay attention, no less powerful. Inside the home, life hums along with a gentle steadiness. You've long noticed how, while men fill the public square, women anchor the private world. And though their names are rarely carved in stone, their hands leave fingerprints on everything that endures. You find yourself thinking of Lysandra again, her soft voice calling to the household slaves as she organizes the evening meal. From the courtyard, you can hear the rhythmic splash of water in clay basins, the faint metallic ring of utensils, and the occasional bark of the small house dog that insists it's the guardian of the gate. For a moment, you simply watch her from the doorway. Her hair is pinned neatly, her tunic cinched high at the waist. She speaks gently but firmly as she directs a young servant girl to fetch figs from the storeroom. There's something almost priestly about the scene, its quiet order, its purpose. Daily life for women in Athens is often described as invisible, but standing there, you realize that invisibility is simply another kind of presence, like air. Without it, nothing else moves. Lysandra glances up at you, smiling faintly. You look like a man about to ask philosophical questions instead of helping. You chuckle and raise your hands in mock surrender. Caught again. I was admiring your temple of order. My temple, she says, runs on clean water and fewer interruptions. You take the hint and fetch a water jug from the courtyard, the clay cool against your fingers. Pouring it into the basin, you catch the reflection of the sky, fading from gold to dusky rose. The air smells faintly of garlic and herbs. Life in the oikos household follows a rhythm as old as the city itself. The men may claim the agora and the assembly, but here the women reign, guardians of the hearth, the linen, the rituals that keep the household in harmony. Each morning, offerings of grain or olive oil are made to Hestia, goddess of the hearth fire, so that flame and fortune alike will keep burning. Historians still argue, you recall overhearing once, whether Athenian women truly lived in confinement or simply preferred discretion. Perhaps both can be true. For while few women walk the public square, the influence of those within the home stretches farther than most men admit. You've seen it yourself, how Lysandra can persuade a visiting cousin to change his vote at the assembly with nothing more than a conversation about what's best for the family. Politics, it seems, finds its way even into the kitchen.
And beyond the household, there's another realm altogether, the world of women's rituals. The festivals and sacred ceremonies where men are barred and the sacred feminine holds sway. Lysandra sometimes vanishes for hours during these times, returning with the faint scent of incense clinging to her tunic and an expression that says she's seen something ancient and wordless. "Tell me about it," you ask once. She only smiles. "Some things are not for telling," she says softly.
But you've heard the whispers, the Thesmophoria, for instance. 3 days every year when women leave their homes to honor Demeter, goddess of the harvest. They camp together outside the city walls, performing rites said to ensure fertility and good crops. No men allowed, not even to look. What happens there is known only to them, preserved by silence and moonlight. One of your friends, a playwright, naturally, once tried to joke about it in a comedy, imagining women plotting against their husbands during the festival. "Maybe they do," Damon had said at the Agora, laughing. "Maybe that's why our city still runs so well."
You'd smiled, but now, watching Lysandra organize the household, you suspect there's truth in it. Influence doesn't always need a stage. Later, as evening deepens, you step outside the house. The street beyond the courtyard is dim now, but from nearby windows, you hear the murmur of other families, voices rising and falling like waves on the shore. Somewhere, a woman sings softly to a child. The melody drifts through the air like smoke. You turn toward the inner courtyard again, where Lysandra and the servant girl have begun preparing wool for weaving. The loom stands tall, its threads gleaming in the lamplight. The faint thwack, thwack of the shuttle fills the silence. "You never tire of weaving?" you ask. She shrugs. "It's quiet work. It gives me space to think." And, she adds with a sly smile, "You men have your speeches. We have our patterns." You sit nearby, watching her hands move with slow precision. Each thread seems deliberate, each crossing an act of quiet purpose. "They say Athena herself taught the first woman to weave," you remark. Lysandra laughs. "Then the goddess has a wicked sense of humor. It takes patience even she might envy." Her laughter fades into a thoughtful silence. "Do you think people will remember us?" she asks suddenly. You tilt your head. "What do you mean?" "All these days, all this work. Do you think anyone will remember what our lives were really like?" The question hangs in the air. You look around. The flicker of the lamp flame, the loom's steady rhythm, the scent of warm bread cooling on the shelf. "Maybe not by name," you say slowly, "but in the things we make, the habits we pass down, the way we treat one another. History is quieter than people think." She nods, eyes distant. "Then I hope it remembers something kind." You sit together in silence for a while, the night deepening around you. From somewhere down the street, laughter echoes. Young voices, perhaps a group of women fetching water from the public fountain. You can picture them, amphorae balanced on their hips, gossiping softly under the moonlight. The fountain itself is a place of quiet rebellion, a rare space where women from every household meet and talk freely, away from the watchful eyes of fathers and husbands. There's one story, half rumor, half truth,
about a widow named Thalia who supposedly organized a lending circle among women at the fountain, pooling coins to buy fabric in bulk and resell it discreetly. Whether she existed or not, no one knows, but her name has become something of a legend, whispered like a prayer when a woman needs courage. Historians still argue, one scholar once wrote, whether such stories reflect real defiance or simply wishful thinking. But standing here, watching Lysandra's calm strength, you're convinced the difference hardly matters. Courage can be quiet. It can wear linen instead of bronze.
A breeze moves through the courtyard, stirring the olive leaves. The dog sighs contentedly near the threshold. Lysandra gathers her finished thread and stretches, her movements slow, graceful. "Come," she says softly, "the stew will burn if you keep staring like that." You smile and follow her back inside. The lamplight pools golden across the walls, and for a moment you imagine the city as a vast tapestry. Every house, every courtyard, every soft voice another thread. And at its center, the women of Athens weaving not just wool, but the very rhythm of civilization. Later, as you settle into bed, you hear the faint hum of her weaving still echoing in your mind. The sound of thread crossing thread, patient, endless, unseen. Outside, the moon rises over the Acropolis, bathing the temples in silver light. Somewhere beyond those marble walls, the goddesses keep their own vigil, watching over mortals who carry their quiet burdens with grace. And as you drift toward sleep, you realize that the city's true strength may not lie in its armies or philosophers, but in the steady, unrecorded hands that keep its heart beating, day after day, year after year, without applause. The morning air carries a crispness that hints at autumn, even as the sun warms the marble streets. You step outside your doorway, the familiar scent of dust, olive oil, and distant sea salt greeting you like an old friend. Today's task is simple but satisfying, tending the small olive grove just beyond the city walls. Though Athens pulses with debate and trade, a man's connection to the land is never fully severed. Here, among the gnarled trunks and silver leaves, time slows and the mind finds space to wander. Your son tags along, dragging a wicker basket behind him, still half asleep. "Do we really have to go this early?" he murmurs, rubbing his eyes. "Early is when the olives are most polite," you reply, smiling. "They won't mind being picked, but they appreciate a gentle hand." He frowns but follows nonetheless, his bare feet crunching over the dusty path. The grove opens before you, sunlight dappled through branches, casting gentle shadows on the soft earth. The olives hang thick and heavy, green and purple, ready for harvest. You kneel and begin to pluck the fruit, the small stones of the soil pressing into your palms. The boy mimics you, fumbling awkwardly at first, but gradually finding a rhythm. There is something almost meditative in the work, the repetitive motion, the faint rustle of leaves, the low hum of bees in the warmer branches. You catch the scent of crushed leaves and the faint bitterness of unripe olives. Somewhere nearby, a donkey brays softly, as though approving the slow rhythm of your labor. The grove is quiet except for these small sounds. A lone shepherd passes at the edge, leading his goats along a worn path. He greets you with a nod, and you return it, acknowledging the unspoken bond between those who work the land. It's a simple existence, yet one that ties you to the earth in a way even the most elaborate assemblies cannot. You pause for a moment and notice a small sprig of wild thyme growing at the base of a twisted olive tree. Its fragrance is sharp and herbal. You remember reading once that the Greeks used thyme not just for cooking, but also in purification rituals. Historians still argue whether the herb's presence in temples was symbolic, medicinal, or both. But you like to imagine it was all three: science, superstition, and ceremony rolled into one fragrant bundle. The boy is now more confident, plucking olives with an almost deliberate care. "Father," he says,
Do you think we could make oil like the big farms?
You could, you reply, brushing a fallen leaf from your tunic. But it takes more than olives. You need time, patience, and a mill that groans as it crushes the fruit. He nods solemnly, as if understanding some profound secret of the earth. Maybe, one day, he murmurs. You continue in companionable silence for a while, filling the wicker baskets. The olive's colors, deep purples and muted greens, catch the sunlight in a way that almost makes them seem alive. You reach up to pluck one from the highest branch, careful not to disturb the bird perched there, watching with bright, curious eyes. Its tiny beak clicks against the fruit, and you chuckle softly.
As you work, your mind drifts to the festivals of Dionysus. The harvest of olives, though quiet and domestic, is connected to larger rhythms of the city and the gods. You imagine a procession winding through the streets, men and women carrying baskets of fruit, wine flowing freely, music and laughter filling the air. Even the simplest acts, picking olives, grinding grain, tending the hearth, are threads woven into these grander patterns. The boy drops one olive and frowns. You pick it up and toss it gently back into the basket. Careful, you say, every olive counts. Small things are the backbone of everything. Even the big temples, he asks, glancing toward the distant Acropolis.
Especially the big temples, you reply. The gods appreciate the small acts as much as the grand ones. One could even say the little sacrifices are what hold the marble giants together. By midday, the baskets are full, heavy with fruit. You rest beneath the gnarled branches of the largest tree, feeling the gentle heat of the sun on your shoulders. The boy sits beside you, eating a small piece of bread, eyes following the flickering shadows. You notice the simplicity of the moment, the quiet rustle of leaves, the hum of distant bees, the faint scent of thyme and soil. For a city built on politics, philosophy, and war, there are moments when life reduces itself to essential elements, reminding you of what truly endures. Eventually, you rise and begin the slow walk home, carrying the baskets. The boy struggles but manages, encouraged by soft words and occasional guidance. The path back feels longer, but the reward is tangible. Soon, the olives will be pressed, their oil poured into amphorae, a small blessing stored for winter. On the way, you pass a neighbor, an old man who tends his own grove with a cane in hand. He waves and calls out, "Good harvest to you! May your trees always bend with generosity." You nod and wave back, and may your branches never break under their own gifts. Back at the house, Lysandra is preparing the hearth for lunch. The scent of simmering lentils mingles with the olive oil already dripping from freshly crushed fruit. Your son sets the baskets aside, proud of his contribution, while you take a moment to admire the work of your hands and the fruit of the grove.
Later, as the meal is served, you all sit together under the courtyard shade. The simple bread, olives, and cheese taste better for the sweat spent running them. Your son recounts his adventure in the grove, animated and full of detail. "I almost got eaten by a bee," he claims, though you suspect exaggeration. "Or perhaps you were merely challenged by Dionysus himself," you reply with a grin. Laughter follows, soft and warm, filling the courtyard. It mingles with the faint rustle of leaves outside, carrying the same timeless cadence that has marked Greek homes for generations. After the meal, the household settles into quiet work. Lysandra spins wool, your daughter plays the lyre, and you repair a small basket with worn handles. The afternoon drifts by slowly, and the city outside hums faintly, a background score to the domestic rhythm. The grove lingers in your mind, not just as a place, but as a metaphor for life itself. Each tree, each branch, each olive bears the weight of care, patience, and small acts repeated day after day. Athens may be remembered for its marble and its assemblies, for the philosophers and the soldiers,
But the backbone of the city is the quiet, steady labor that happens behind closed doors and beneath the sun.
As dusk approaches, you step outside once more. The air is cooler, carrying faint echoes of distant conversations and the bray of a donkey returning from the fields. The baskets sit ready, the harvest secured. And as the sky deepens into shades of violet and indigo, you feel the simple satisfaction of a day well spent, a connection to earth, family, and the gentle rhythm of Athenian life. The stars appear slowly, one by one, as night begins its quiet descent. You take a deep breath, inhaling the mingled scent of olives, dust, and cooling stone. The city hums softly in the background, and you realize that life, even in its simplicity, is never truly still. Evening settles over Athens with a gentle touch, cooling the stone streets and softening the edges of the city. The sun dips behind the hills, casting long shadows over the Acropolis, and the distant hum of the agora fades into a calm murmur. You step into the courtyard, the smell of dinner already wafting from the hearth, and pause to take a deep breath. There's a subtle rhythm to this hour, the world slowing, preparing for night, and it feels almost sacred. Your daughter sits beneath the fig tree, strumming her small lyre. The notes are tentative at first, but gradually she finds a melody that drifts through the courtyard like a gentle breeze. You watch her, thinking of how music threads itself into every corner of Athenian life, at festivals, in the home, in the quiet moments between work and conversation. It's more than entertainment, it's a reminder that beauty can exist in routine. Lysandra emerges from the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour, her tunic smudged with the earthy hues of cooking. She places a small dish of lentil stew on the low table and sets out bread and olives. The smell is rich and comforting, a faint smoke curling from the hearth. You notice how she moves, graceful yet purposeful, her gestures measured and deliberate. Each movement seems to carry centuries of inherited knowledge, an invisible thread connecting generations of women who maintained households like miniature kingdoms. Your son, still energized despite the day's labor, settles on a cushion beside the table. "Father," he says, "I think the gymnasium made me stronger, but the grove made me wiser." You raise an eyebrow. "Wiser, you say, and how so?" "I learned patience," he replies, "and to notice things I might otherwise ignore, like the bees and the shapes of the leaves and even the smell of the soil." You nod, impressed. Observation, after all, is the first step toward understanding. You remember your own childhood, learning to read the world through small details. The tilt of a branch, the texture of stone, the patterns of cloud in the sky. Every seemingly insignificant observation was a lesson, a tiny mirror of nature's logic. Dinner begins quietly. The children eat eagerly, their conversation meandering between trivial adventures and questions about the gods. "Do you think Athena really walks among us?" your daughter asks, her lyre now resting beside her. "Maybe," you reply softly, "or maybe we just see what we hope to see." Even philosophers debate whether the gods intervene directly or simply inspire us to act as if they do. She frowns slightly, chewing thoughtfully. "So they might just be stories?" "Perhaps," you say, smiling. "Or perhaps the stories themselves are the lesson. They teach us how to live, even if the gods are invisible." The evening deepens, and you all linger at the table, savoring not just the food, but the rhythm of togetherness. Outside, the city quiets. The clatter of carts and the calls of merchants are replaced by the low hum of distant voices and the occasional bark of a dog. The soft glow of oil lamps from neighboring homes casts pools of golden light on the street, and the wind carries the faint fragrance of wild thyme from nearby gardens. After dinner, you move to the hearth, where Lysandra is beginning her nightly ritual of tidying and preparing the home for sleep. The servants assist quietly, their movements practiced and efficient. You notice how everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest household helper, contributes to the evening's rhythm. Even small acts, sweeping the floor, fetching water, arranging cushions, become a kind of meditation, a thread in the tapestry of daily life. Your son leans against you, exhausted but content. "Father," he murmurs, "do you think people 1,000 years from now will know how we lived?" You consider the question carefully. "Some will," you reply. "Through stories, through objects, through the habits we leave behind." Even the simplest act, picking olives, spinning wool, teaching a child, can ripple through time. Historians still argue whether everyday life or great battles define a civilization, but I think both matter. One can't exist without the other. The children eventually retire to their chambers, their footsteps light and hurried on the stone floors. You linger in the courtyard, the fig tree casting long, dark shadows. The night air carries the faint chirp of crickets, the rustle of leaves, and the whisper of distant voices returning from the agora or a late visit to a neighbor. You reflect on the ordinary beauty of the day, the gymnasium, the olive grove, the quiet attention of the household, the fleeting yet meaningful exchanges of observation and conversation. It is in these small, repeated actions that the city's true character emerges, not in speeches or marble monuments, but in the way people live, teach, and care for one another. Lysandra joins you quietly, carrying a small oil lamp. Its warm glow illuminates the courtyard in soft pools of light. She sets it down near the fig tree, the flame flickering as a gentle sentinel against the encroaching darkness. "You've been quiet," she observes softly. "Thinking," you reply, watching the shadows dance, "about how everything we do is part of a larger pattern. The city, the household, the world. Everything is connected if we notice it." She smiles faintly. "And what do you notice tonight?" "I notice that even in ordinary life, there's a kind of wonder," you say. "A rhythm that teaches patience, awareness, and care. That, perhaps, is the real legacy of Athens. Not the battles or laws, but the quiet moments that shape us all." She nods, understanding more than words can convey. The courtyard is still, bathed in the soft light of the lamp and the faint silver glow of the moon. Somewhere in the distance, a lyre begins to play, a slow, lilting melody that seems to belong to the stars themselves. You inhale deeply, savoring the scents of olive oil, herbs, and cooling stone, feeling a calm settle over your body and mind. You think of the day's lessons, the grove that taught patience, the gymnasium that strengthened both body and spirit, the home that nurtures and sustains. Each moment, however ordinary, is a thread in a larger tapestry, a living proof of the city's enduring rhythm. As the night deepens, you retreat indoors. The hearth flickers, the lamp casts its warm glow, and the city outside sleeps quietly. Your thoughts drift to the rhythm of life you've observed, the lessons embedded in ordinary tasks, and the small ways in which Athens continues to shape its citizens, quietly and unassumingly. And as you lay down to rest, the final note of your daughter's lyre drifts from memory, mingling with the soft night sounds, reminding you that even ordinary life contains beauty, patience, and wonder if one only pays attention. Morning arrives with the softest touch, the sun spilling gold across the rooftops, warming the stone streets just enough to wake the city without startling it. You stretch, feeling the subtle soreness from yesterday's gymnasium exercises and the olive grove labor. There's a pleasant ache in your arms and legs, the kind that reminds you of effort well spent. Outside, the air carries the faint scent of baking bread from a neighbor's oven, mingling with the lingering aroma of herbs and olive oil from your own household. Today is a market day in the Agora, but not just any market. It is one of the smaller seasonal fairs, where farmers from the surrounding countryside bring produce, pottery, and homemade wares. The stalls, though modest, are vibrant with color and life. You decide to take the children with you. The boy, still animated from the previous day's exploits, drags a small basket to carry trinkets or food he may choose to buy. Your daughter hums softly, her lyre slung over her shoulder, a quiet soundtrack to the morning bustle. The streets are alive, but not overwhelming. Shopkeepers arrange their goods, bright figs, clusters of grapes, olives still glistening with morning dew, woven baskets and clay jugs in hues of ochre and red. Artisans demonstrate their crafts, shaping small pots and cups before your eyes. A young potter wields her wheel with a quiet confidence that makes you pause. The spinning clay seems almost alive under her hands, smooth and pliable, waiting for the touch that will make it endure. Historians still argue whether women in Athens had more influence in craft or ritual spaces, but watching her, you suspect the answer lies somewhere in both. You guide your son toward a stall selling small figurines. The delicate shapes, tiny animals, seated philosophers, miniature vessels capture his attention. "Father," he whispers, "do you think we could get one for the courtyard?" "You can," you say, smiling, "if you promise to take care of it." Figurines are not just decorations, they are companions in a sense. And, like us, they reflect the world we live in. He selects a small owl, its wings folded, eyes wide and intelligent. The symbolism is obvious. Athena's bird, representing wisdom. You hand the stall owner a few coins, and the boy cradles his new purchase proudly. Your daughter, meanwhile, wanders toward a group of women selling herbs and woven baskets. She is fascinated by the colors and textures, reaching out to touch bundles of thyme, rosemary, and dried flowers. One woman, smiling at her curiosity, allows her to smell the herbs. "The scent teaches you patience," she says softly. "You cannot rush wisdom." The lesson isn't lost on you. The agora is a classroom, though unstructured, where everyone, child, adult, artisan, learns through observation, conversation, and experience. You notice the rhythm of exchanges, a careful haggling here, a polite gesture there, laughter breaking through the steady hum of barter. Life moves forward in small, deliberate steps. As you stroll through the stalls, a musician has set up near a column, playing a lyre with gentle fingers. The melody is soft, weaving through the hum of conversation like a slow river through stones. The boy pauses, mesmerized, and your daughter hums along, her own instrument almost instinctively joining the tune. Music is everywhere in Athens, present even in the simplest spaces, linking past and present with its quiet insistence. Near a corner of the market, a philosopher speaks softly to a small group of young men. His words are thoughtful, deliberate, and gentle. "Virtue," he says, "is not only the study of great deeds, but the cultivation of small acts. To be just in private life is as important as justice in public life." The statement strikes you as quietly profound. Even amidst the market's noise, there is room for reflection and instruction. The children wander closer to him, curious. "Do we need to understand virtue to buy olives?" the boy asks innocently. You laugh softly. "Perhaps not to buy them, but to eat them wisely." A woman nearby hands him a small olive branch, her eyes twinkling. "Wisdom begins in simple things," she says, and the boy nods solemnly, as if he has just been initiated into a secret society of observation. You continue through the market, noting small, almost imperceptible details. The way a young servant balances two baskets on her head, the careful threading of coins through the hands of a merchant, the soft clinking of keys as a scribe organizes clay tablets. Each gesture carries significance, though it might seem ordinary. Life, you realize, is an accumulation of these moments. By midday, the sun has climbed high, casting sharp shadows along the columns and stalls. Vendors call out louder now, emphasizing bargains and fresh stock.
You take a moment to rest near the fountain at the center of the square, watching as a group of children toss coins and make wishes. The water glints like liquid silver, reflecting the sky and the pale marble of surrounding buildings. "Father," your daughter whispers, pointing to the fountain, "do you think people long ago threw coins here too?" "I believe so," you answer. "Some habits endure longer than we think. Wishes, hope, and the small magic of everyday life, these are timeless." Nearby, a man sharpens his tools, metal ringing against stone. The sound is rhythmic and grounding, a counterpoint to the laughter and chatter around you. You notice the care in his movements, how each strike of the file brings order to the metal, much as thought brings order to the mind. Even in mundane work, there is purpose. Historians still debate how the laborers and artisans influenced public life, but clearly, their efforts ripple quietly through the city. The boy tugs at your sleeve. "Can we buy some bread for the courtyard?"
"You may," you reply, taking his hand and leading him to a baker. The smell is irresistible. Yeast, honey, and warmth wrapped in golden crust. He chooses a small loaf, still steaming, and carries it with a mix of pride and caution. As you make your way home, baskets laden with olives, herbs, and bread, you reflect on the lessons embedded in the morning: patience, observation, small acts of care, and the interconnectedness of the city's lives. Every citizen, merchant, artisan, philosopher, or child contributes to Athens' ongoing story, often unnoticed, but always essential. Back at the courtyard, Lysandra greets you with a warm smile. "You've been to the market?" she asks, noting the bounty you carry. "Yes," you say, setting down the baskets. And the city continues to teach, even in its smallest corners. The children unload their purchases, chattering about what they've learned and seen. The courtyard fills with a quiet energy, soft and domestic, a living testament to the ordinary rhythms that sustain life. You pause, noticing the olive branch your son carries from the market, placing it gently on the table. The leaves catch the light of the afternoon sun, shimmering silver and green. Small details like this, the quiet beauty of leaves, the taste of fresh bread, the notes of a lyre, remind you that history is not only made in assemblies or battles, but in daily acts, repeated and observed, cherished and shared. The city beyond your walls hums with the continued pulse of life, yet here in the courtyard, time seems to stretch. The lessons of the morning, simple yet profound, sink into memory. Care for the earth, attention to detail, the weaving of small acts into a larger story. Even as the sun begins its descent, you feel a deep satisfaction. Life, you realize, is a quiet composition. Each person a note, each act a chord, together forming the melody of Athens. And in this melody, even ordinary citizens leave a mark that echoes quietly through time. The late afternoon sky begins to soften into hues of rose and lavender, and the city takes on a gentle hush. The heat of the day has faded, leaving behind only the warmth of stone and sun, a comforting residue. You step out into the courtyard, feeling the cool breeze brush against your skin, carrying scents of thyme, olive oil, and the faint tang of the distant sea. The children are still busy with small tasks, tidying the house or arranging toys, while Lysandra tends to the evening hearth, her movements deliberate, quiet, and almost meditative. Today, you decide to focus on the art of storytelling, a practice as old as Athens itself. The city's philosophers argue endlessly about virtue, ethics, and the ideal life. But stories, simple, lived, and spoken, carry truths that even the most learned cannot capture in marble or manuscript. You sit on a low bench beneath the fig tree, calling the children close. The boy drags his cushion near, while your daughter rests her lyre beside her, leaning in with curiosity. "Do you know," you begin, "that long before Athens became what it is,
Our ancestors told tales to teach, to entertain, and sometimes just to keep warm on cold nights. Stories were the first teachers, and in many ways, they still are. The children listen, rapt, their eyes wide as they settle into the familiar intimacy of courtyard storytelling. You recall the myths that colored your own childhood. Heroes battling monsters, clever goddesses guiding humans, mortals punished or rewarded for pride or kindness. There's a magic in these tales, not in the monsters themselves, but in the lessons woven through them. Historians still argue whether myths were primarily moral instruction or entertainment, but you find both truths fascinating. You begin to recount a story you heard from Damon about a traveling merchant who crossed the mountains from Thessaly to Athens. He carried rare spices, fine textiles, and small glass trinkets that glimmered like captured sunlight. But more than his wares, he brought news of distant cities and customs unknown to most Athenians. The boy leans forward, whispering, "Did he meet monsters too?" "Only the ones we can't see," you reply, smiling. "The monsters of worry, impatience, or pride." The afternoon deepens, and the city outside seems to slow, as if listening in. You notice how the small details of courtyard life, the swaying fig leaves, the distant murmur of the market closing, the faint clink of a servant organizing vessels become part of the story. Every sound, every movement adds texture and depth, reminding you that storytelling is as much about observing life as it is about words. Lysandra pauses by the hearth to listen, smiling softly. She doesn't need to be part of the tale. Her presence alone grounds it, her quiet attention a reminder that stories are never truly solitary acts. They ripple outward, touching all who are present. You recount the merchant's journey, describing the narrow mountain paths, the chatter of foreign markets, and the smell of spices unfamiliar to Athenian noses. You tell of a night under the stars, where the merchant and his companions traded stories by firelight, each tale carrying a lesson or a warning. You notice your son adjusting the small olive branch he carries from the market, using it almost like a prop, pointing it toward imaginary obstacles. "Did they ever get lost?" he asks, eyes wide. "Sometimes," you reply, "but getting lost is part of learning. Even the gods might lose their way, if only to understand mortals better." Your daughter begins plucking a soft melody on her lyre, accompanying your story with notes that rise and fall like a gentle breeze through the trees. The music adds a layer of enchantment, turning ordinary afternoon into something quietly extraordinary. Music, like storytelling, is a bridge between moments, connecting past and present, imagination and reality. The merchant finally arrives in Athens, weary but wiser. He carries his goods to the agora, marveling at the city's architecture, the rhythm of its streets, and the subtle dances of its people. You pause here, letting your voice soften. The children are silent, hanging on the quiet details. The smell of fresh bread from distant ovens, the echo of sandals on marble, the chatter of merchants exchanging more than goods, wisdom, gossip, fleeting philosophies. Historians still argue, you murmur, whether travelers like him shaped our city's character more than our lawmakers. But you let the statement drift without resolution, knowing the ambiguity is part of the lesson. Life is rarely neatly categorized. You conclude the tale with a small reflection. The merchant's journey is not only about trade or adventure, but about learning to observe, to engage, and to carry stories back home. The children nod, understanding more than they can articulate. The boy clutches his figurine owl a little tighter, perhaps imagining it perched atop the merchant's cart. Your daughter strums a final lingering note, letting it fade into the courtyard's quiet. The sun has lowered further, spilling amber and rose across the courtyard walls. Shadows stretch long and soft, enveloping the small space in comfort. You notice how even in ordinary domestic life, there are layers of beauty and instruction. The way light falls across stone, the rhythm of conversation, the gentle lessons embedded in small acts. Lysandra finally returns to the hearth, carrying a small tray of water and bread. She places it beside the children and smiles. "Stories are more nourishing than food sometimes," she says, her eyes glinting with quiet amusement. You laugh softly. True, but both are important. One fills the belly, the other fills the mind. The children eat quietly, still immersed in the reverie of the story. Outside, the city prepares for night. Merchants pack up stalls, the sound of wheels and hooves fades, and the distant lyre of another street musician hums like a lullaby. The rhythm of Athens slows, settling into a gentle cadence that mirrors the courtyard's own quiet pulse. You lean back on the bench, letting the weight of the day settle. There is something profound in this ordinary evening, the weaving together of small details, stories, music, and care. Each act, whether plucking an olive, telling a tale, or listening intently, contributes to a tapestry that endures beyond the day. In this quiet space, you realize that life's true lessons are rarely grand. They are embedded in observation, patience, and gentle attention. The merchant's story, the music, the scents, and the rhythm of the household all converge into a seamless understanding. Athens is as much about small moments as it is about monuments or assemblies. As twilight deepens, you take a deep breath, inhaling the mingling scents of herbs, bread, and cooling stone. The stars begin to shimmer faintly above the Acropolis, a quiet reminder of time passing, of history unfolding, of life continuing in its gentle, patient way. The children finish their bread, and you gather them close. The courtyard is calm. The city hums faintly beyond the walls, and you feel the weight of the ordinary yet extraordinary flow of life, steady, enduring, and quietly remarkable. The night settles softly over Athens, a gentle cloak of indigo and silver draping across rooftops and marble columns. You step into the courtyard once again, breathing in the crisp air that carries hints of wild herbs, cooling stone, and distant fires from neighboring homes. The rhythm of the city has slowed. The once bustling agora now lies in quiet shadows, punctuated only by the occasional murmur of a late passerby or the soft bray of a donkey returning from distant fields. This is the hour when reflection comes most naturally, when the patterns of the day settle into memory, and you are left to observe life in its gentlest form. The children are curled in small cushions by the hearth, drowsy but still alert enough to listen. Their day has been filled with work, music, and storytelling, yet their energy lingers in small bursts. A yawn, a stretch, the occasional soft whisper about what they have seen or learned. Lysandra moves among them, her presence both comforting and commanding, ensuring that each small need is met before the quiet of night envelops the household. You sit nearby, listening to the gentle crackle of the hearth fire. The warmth spreads through the courtyard, mingling with the cool evening air, creating a delicate balance that soothes the senses. There is a kind of meditation in observing the flickering flames, the shadows they cast, and the way light dances across familiar surfaces. The city outside may be steeped in history and debate, but within this small household, life is measured in rhythms. Tending the hearth, preparing the evening meal, sharing stories, listening, observing. Your mind drifts back over the day's experiences, the olive grove, the market, the simple acts of care that bind the household together. Each small task, each deliberate motion feels infused with purpose. The children, in their quiet curiosity, are mirrors of the city itself, learning, observing, participating, absorbing lessons without always knowing their depth. You realize that education in Athens is not confined to the gymnasium or the assembly. It is embedded in daily life, in the smallest actions and interactions. Historians still argue whether private education or public instruction was more influential in shaping citizens, but in moments like this, you see how they are inseparable. You reach for a small clay cup of water and drink, noting the earthy taste and the way it refreshes more than the body. It steadies the mind. The boy leans against you, eyes heavy but attentive, and murmurs, "Father, do you think people will remember our small acts?" You smile softly, stroking his hair. Perhaps not by name, but by the patterns we leave behind, the rhythm of our days, and the care we show. That is the true memory of life. Your daughter picks up her lyre again, plucking a slow, reflective melody that harmonizes with the crackle of the fire and the distant sounds of the city. Music, like storytelling, is an unspoken thread connecting past, present, and future. It reminds you that even ordinary moments carry significance, that quiet observation can be as profound as public discourse. Lysandra joins you on the bench, her expression serene. She adjusts the lamp, ensuring a soft glow spreads across the courtyard. "There's a kind of magic in these evenings," she says quietly, "when the city is silent and life slows. You notice things you never see in the daylight rush." You nod, watching shadows stretch and bend across the walls. "The rhythm of the household mirrors the rhythm of Athens," you reply. "Even as the city debates and plans, the quiet moments sustain it. The ordinary threads hold the tapestry together." The children drift to sleep, their soft breathing blending with the night sounds. The occasional distant dog bark, a murmur from a neighboring house, the faint rustle of olive leaves stirred by the breeze. You notice how the courtyard itself seems to exhale, releasing the day's warmth and absorbing the soft darkness of evening. You take a moment to reflect on the lessons embedded in ordinary life: patience, observation, gentle attention, and the quiet weaving of daily routines. Each act of care, tending the hearth, preparing food, listening to a child's curiosity, is a thread in a larger pattern. These threads may be invisible to the historians who debate laws and battles, but they endure in subtle, meaningful ways. As the sky deepens into a rich indigo, stars begin to pierce the darkness, delicate points of light over the city. You trace constellations remembered from childhood, imagining the same patterns reflected in the minds of other Athenians long before you. The universe itself seems to mirror the rhythm of the household: small acts, subtle patterns, enduring constancy. You rise and step toward the fig tree, brushing a hand over its leaves, feeling the soft texture beneath your fingertips. The shadows of branches stretch long, mingling with the courtyard's quiet, creating shapes that seem almost alive. You think of how Athens, like the fig tree, offers shade, sustenance, and rhythm to those who dwell within it. Even the smallest branches contribute to the whole, just as each citizen, child, woman, man, or servant contributes to the city's ongoing story. Lysandra stands beside you, her presence steady and reassuring. "The city sleeps, but life continues," she says softly, "in small acts, in quiet care, in attention to details that matter." You inhale the cool night air, savoring its clarity and calm. The distant hum of the city is a lullaby, the crackle of the hearth a steady rhythm, the soft sway of the fig leaves a gentle accompaniment. Athens may be remembered for its philosophers, its warriors, its temples of marble, but you know its heart lies here, in ordinary moments, repeated patiently, lovingly, and without fanfare. The courtyard glows softly in the lamp's light, the children asleep, the household at rest. You feel the quiet satisfaction of a day lived fully, in balance with nature, the city, and your own sense of purpose. The olive grove, the market, the stories, the music, All are threads in a larger pattern that endures beyond the day, beyond the household, beyond your own brief time in this world. The night deepens further. You sit once more on the bench, feeling the warmth of the lamp, the coolness of the stone beneath you, and the rhythm of life that continues in subtle, beautiful ways. The courtyard is your anchor, the city your larger tapestry, and the quiet, ordinary moments your enduring legacy. Soon, sleep will claim the household, and you will retreat as well. But the lessons of the day, the subtle rhythms, the observation of life in its simplest forms will remain. In every leaf, every olive, every whispered melody, Athens persists, quiet, patient, unassuming, yet profoundly alive. Section 15. The night has fully embraced Athens, soft shadows stretching across the courtyard, pooling around the fig tree and the low walls of the house. A gentle breeze stirs the olive leaves, carrying the faint scent of thyme and cooling stone. You step outside once more, taking in the quiet, a soft calm settling over your shoulders. The city itself seems to breathe in rhythm with the household. The distant hum of the agora long faded, leaving only subtle echoes of footsteps, whispered conversations, and the occasional bray of a distant donkey. Tonight, the ordinary has become extraordinary in its tranquility, and you allow yourself to notice every detail. The children are asleep now, tucked beneath soft blankets, their small breaths rising and falling like the quiet tide of the sea. Lysandra moves through the courtyard, checking the hearth, smoothing a cushion, adjusting the lamp's flame so it casts a gentle, reassuring glow. Even in her smallest gestures, there is a kind of ceremony, a ritual of care and attentiveness that shapes the rhythm of the household. You watch her, appreciating the quiet strength it takes to maintain these patterns, to keep life moving smoothly without the noise or recognition of the outside world. You sit beneath the fig tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze, leaves rustling like whispered secrets. The night sky above glimmers faintly with stars, distant and timeless, as if the city below were mirrored in the heavens. There is a profound beauty in this, in the stillness, in the ordinary acts that make life meaningful. Each olive harvested, each loaf of bread baked, each note plucked on a lyre. These are the subtle contributions that shape Athens as surely as laws or battles. Historians still argue whether daily life or monumental events truly define a city, but standing here, you feel the answer quietly in your bones. The gymnasium with its disciplined exercises and playful rivalries, the olive grove teaching patience and observation, the market alive with colors, scents, and the rhythmic cadence of barter, and the evening storytelling that carried lessons through music and tale. Each of these moments, though ordinary, has a quiet power, a way of connecting people, shaping minds, and nurturing the household's steady pulse. Your mind wanders to the rituals that quietly mark the city's heartbeat, the soft lighting of the hearth at dusk, offerings to Hestia to keep the flame alive, water poured into clay basins for small daily blessings, and the careful tending of both young and old. Even small acts, the arrangement of cushions, the careful stacking of amphorae, the sweep of a floor, carry meaning beyond immediate utility. They are the patterns that weave time into memory, that sustain life, and that allow Athens to endure. A faint sound catches your attention, the distant strum of a lyre from a neighboring courtyard, slow and deliberate. Music travels through the streets like a subtle messenger, connecting households, inspiring reflection, reminding the city that even in silence, life continues to pulse. You breathe deeply, letting the notes mingle with the scents of herbs, bread, and cooling stone, feeling an inner calm settle more deeply. You think of the women whose presence sustains the household, the quiet guidance, the careful oversight, the soft yet firm hands that organize, prepare, and nurture.
Their work, often invisible in the public records, is nevertheless the backbone of daily life. Even Lysandra, in her seemingly simple routines, shapes the rhythm, stability, and warmth that the family relies upon. Her influence ripples outward, touching every small action, every habit, and every lesson the children absorb. As the courtyard darkens further, the lamp's flame becomes a tiny beacon, flickering against the shadows. You notice the way the light interacts with the fig tree's leaves, the low walls, and the scattered household items. A tapestry of ordinary life rendered magical in the gentle illumination. The hush of the night emphasizes the significance of these small details, the unnoticed textures that form the city's true character. Slowly, you rise and walk among the olive trees, your fingers brushing the rough bark, the smooth stones at their base. Each tree seems to whisper in its own language, carrying memory, growth, and resilience. You think of the generations who have tended these groves, observed the skies, harvested the fruit, and passed knowledge quietly from parent to child. Life here is cyclical, patient, and enduring, marked more by repetition than drama, and yet profoundly significant. The courtyard settles into a deep stillness, the children breathing evenly in sleep, the household protected by the soft glow of the hearth and lamp. You pause to watch the fig leaves sway against the night sky, imagining their shadows tracing patterns that will never be recorded, but which will always exist for those who observe. Each small act of care, attention, and presence is a quiet legacy, a ripple in time. You take one final look around the courtyard, the olive baskets from the day's harvest, the traces of flour on the kitchen floor, the lyre resting quietly against a wall, the gentle sway of the fig tree, and the soft light bathing the space. Everything has a rhythm, a pulse, a sense of purpose. It is ordinary life in its most profound form. Finally, you settle back on the bench beneath the fig tree, letting the cool night air mix with the warmth of the hearth's lingering glow. The stars above shimmer faintly, and the city sleeps in a quiet, enduring peace. You reflect on the day, on the ordinary yet extraordinary acts that sustain life, and feel a deep sense of connection to the household, to Athens, and to the unbroken chain of daily life stretching across generations. The night whispers its gentle lullaby through the courtyard. You close your eyes briefly, breathing in the scents, sounds, and textures of the evening. In this quiet, you know that even the smallest, most mundane actions, the harvest, the tending of the hearth, the gentle guidance of children, carry significance that endures far beyond a single day. Now, the courtyard rests under the night sky, the household asleep, and Athens itself quiet. You feel a gentle contentment, a sense of continuity and peace, knowing that ordinary life, repeated patiently and with care, is the true heartbeat of the city. And as sleep finally draws you in, you carry the calm, rhythm, and quiet lessons of the day into your dreams. As you drift further into the night, the courtyard seems to expand, embracing the city in its quiet calm. Every small sound, the rustle of fig leaves, the faint crackle of the hearth, the distant hum of other households settling in, blends into a gentle rhythm, lulling your thoughts into softness. You breathe slowly, letting the day's lessons dissolve into a sense of continuity. The olive trees, the market, the lyre, the hearth, and the quiet guidance of loved ones forming an unbroken chain of ordinary yet meaningful life. There is no urgency here, no expectation. Time itself seems to stretch and yawn, welcoming you into a state of gentle awareness. The children sleep peacefully, their dreams perhaps filled with echoes of the day. The taste of fresh bread, the soft strum of a lyre, the warm sun on stone paths, the quiet guidance of a parent or sibling. You feel the same sense of contentment settling within you, a reassurance that the ordinary, patiently attended, endures far beyond immediate notice.
Outside, the stars continue their slow, eternal dance, distant witnesses to the rhythms of countless households. You imagine the generations before and after you, each following their own quiet routines, each leaving small, unnoticed traces in the tapestry of life. And in that reflection, you find comfort. Even unnoticed, life matters, and the gentle repetition of care is its own kind of magic.
Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and allow yourself to drift further into sleep. The courtyard, the city, and Athens itself rest, steady and enduring. Your body relaxes, your mind softens, and you carry the calm of the evening with you, letting the lessons of ordinary life unfold gently in your dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.